confirmation of quorum, which we have. I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have adoption of public agenda?
Move adoption.
Second.
Director Wally seconded. Any additions? See none. All questions. Anyone opposed? Call carried. Item D, petitions and delegations. Discovery Island Salmon Farm. We have Jamie Bowling, Wilderness Tourism Association of BC. I'll make a presentation, but I believe we have Brianne Bernal on, correct?
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks. You have myself, Brianne Quinnell, who's president of Wilderness Tourism Association, Jamie Boulding, as well as Ross Campbell, representing Wilderness Tourism Association today.
Okay, thank you, and welcome.
Would you like us to go ahead?
The floor is yours.
Wonderful, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today about the value of the wilderness and adventure tourism sector in this region. We represent the Wilderness Tourism Association of British Columbia, or WTA for short, and we're an industry association representing wilderness and adventure tourism operators throughout the province. Our membership includes 15 member companies that operate within the Strathcona Regional District. We speak to you today as business owners within the community, as Wilderness Tourism Association members, as well as owner-operators of thriving ecotourism companies. And we're coming before you today for several reasons, and we want to ensure that the SRD board members are appraised of the value of the wilderness and adventure tourism sector in this region, and the fact that these businesses depend on healthy wild salmon stocks. We'd like to ask the SRD and its board to recognize the needs of all constituents within the region, as well as supporting the government-to-government consultations and resulting decision by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to remove open net pen aquaculture from the Discovery Islands. And we ask that the SRD work with various governments and levels of government to assist with this urgent transition of the net pens out of the Discovery Islands. The wilderness tourism operators in the region include lodges, whale and wildlife watching tours, bear viewing companies, kayaking companies, boat charters, sport fishing, and many more. These companies depend on and thrive when there is healthy wild salmon stocks and are considered part of the wild salmon economy. The removal of these farms in the Discovery Islands will benefit the communities and the wild salmon economy up and down the coast, including here in the Strathcona Regional District. The tourism sector in the province is valued at over $22.3 billion. The tourism sector contributes over $8.7 billion in GDP to the province, in comparison to the aquaculture and fishing, which represents contributions of $3.3 billion. The tourism sector on Vancouver Island sees over 5.5 million visitors annually and generates over $2.2 billion in expenditures, providing over 60,000 jobs. Within the Discovery Island, there are over 60 tourism businesses that are directly dependent on wilderness and wildlife. And these businesses, of course, provide many other spin-off effects to the community. The tourism industry in this region is estimated at between $40 and $50 million per year. And these tourism products and experiences, of course, are largely centered around the iconic BC experiences such as bear and wildlife viewing, sport and recreational fishing, all of which are again dependent on healthy wild salmon stocks. And anything that is a threat to healthy wild salmon is a threat to these businesses and the benefits that they have to the community. I'd like to pass it to Jamie Boulding, owner of Strathcona Park Lodge, now to speak.
He's on mute.
Maybe we're
right?
having problems with Jake. Oh, there you are, Jamie. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Bad connections are one of our other issues in running a business in this thing is this radio communication. So I'd just like to say that transition for the salmon economy in our case, and
Maybe he should turn off his
salmon
video.
farming and we're very, my video is weak. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just turn off the video. I'll just turn off the video.
Okay, turned off is off now. No. Yeah. Hope that's little bit better. You have bad connection here, so sorry to hear that. I'm running out of time here. I just think that sustainable agriculture is a model that I hope that can happen. We're pro-business. We think it can be done. We would love to buy done aqua.
Not getting anything.
No.
He's frozen.
He's frozen up on us now.
Yeah, maybe if we can come back to Jamie, can we try Ross Campbell and see how Ross's connection out on Sonora Island is today?
Okay,
Hello, everybody. How do you read me today?
good.
Good.
Am I able to share the screen? I'm not familiar with this platform, but I've got a share screen button here. I'm hoping I was hoping to share a screen with you, of course. Okay, technology is wonderful. Okay, can you see a picture of my daughter?
No.
No. Can you?
Do we need to give him permission to share?
Might help.
I would maybe suggest him just move on without your sharing if you can, Mr. Campbell.
Okay, it's too bad, but I think the photos got submitted. I'll just go without the photos and I'll maybe give you a quick verbal description of the photos. So, hello, my name is Ross Campbell. I currently own and operate the Ecotourism Charter Vessel Columbia 3. I also sit on the board of the WTA. I would like to bring this discussion down to sea level. I have lived on Sonora Island at the center of this dispute for over 42 years, and I have rare firsthand experience of the damage fish farms are having on the wild salmon stocks. For the last 15 years, my 3 children that have now grown up have been taking samples of out-migrating wild salmon smolts and monitoring them for sea lice and disease. They return to my dock and quantify, tabulate, and disseminate their findings. Thousands and thousands of hours of volunteer time. Please understand, the wild salmon smolts, when they leave the Fraser River estuary, among others, when my children take test sets from Bowen Island, the smolts are free of sea lice. When they take samples from the head of Butte Inlet or Tobe Inlet, they are free of sea lice. When they are off the south end of Texada and the south of Quadra, they are free of sea lice. But as soon as the smolts start to transit the Discovery Islands, where the highest concentrations of the sea fish the sea lice loads are staggering. I have a picture that's not included of my daughter holding up a sample of the smolts that she's taken. And my kids return home to my dock on Sonora and meticulously tabulate their findings. Thousands of tests and of years of work. The tiny sea lice, without the pictures, it's a bit tough, but I've got lots of photos of very small fish that come into my dock. The tiny fish with their newly formed skin and scale structures have zero capability to withstand the parasitic impact of a single sea lice. And if you can see the pictures that I have, it's small smolts, maybe 2 inches, 3 inches long, loaded in sea lice. These salmon, these smolts are not going to survive. It is not rocket science to see how they are imperiled. The evidence always vanishes. It's just a quick meal for a sea lice. It's a quick meal for a seagull. More than once, I've met my children on my dock to glimpse them in action, and my daughter is often crying. She's in her 30s now. Dad, in 2020, we are finding numbers as high as 99 infection rate with an average of 9 sea lice per smolt. And the sea lice in the pictures have these very nice long tails. They look like sort of rat tails on an animal. Those are actually strings of eggs exponentially expanding the sea lice population. This is not a rhetorical discussion. about merits of jobs or not. This is an actual problem that is killing the wild salmon as they go by my house. As a resident of the Okasolo Channel, as an ecotourism operator, and as a board member of the Wilderness Tourism Association, I request the Strathcona Regional District support the DFO's decision to remove the fish farms from the Discovery Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brianna, do we have Mr. Bolden back or not?
Jamie, are you there?
I don't see
I'm
him on.
sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry that the connection isn't working for him. Jamie was going to discuss a little bit about why, as a iconic community business, salmon are important to his business and his guests, and that wild salmon are just such an integral part of what he does. So of course I haven't done justice to what Jamie was going to share with you, but we did submit a written kind of summary of our notes.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up for questions. I have Director Abram and Director Davis. Director Abram, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to just say thank you, Brianne, Ross, and Jamie for being here. Brianne and Ross are both constituents of mine, and I'd like everybody here publicly to know that Brianne helped to organize the massive marine cleanup around the Discovery Islands and the channels so down. And I thank you very much for that, Brianne. Your work was fantastic. So thanks for your presentation today. Listened carefully and let others ask their questions.
Okay, thank you, Director Abram. Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks also for your presentation. I'm sure you would find that there's a real diversity of opinion with directors here, based primarily on the economic impacts of fish farming in their communities. For my community, we're on the west side of Vancouver Island. We have seen some pretty serious sea lice outbreaks and algal blooms over the years since fish farms have come into our area. Now, my community has some economic development benefit from fish farms, but primarily we're a sport fishing community, so we really depend heavily on wild salmon here. And the smolts have to transit the fish farms, much like what you're talking about in Discovery Island. When I was on council 10 years ago, I had access to information from Grieg Seafoods, who operate in this area. And they had outbreaks in their farms of up to 22 lice per salmon. And just last year, they had outbreaks of up to 14 lice per salmon. And there hasn't been a lot of documentation on the other side here, but I know there was some work done last year, and the smolts were just getting hammered in this area as they're swimming by these farms. They're just covered in them, and it's really having a huge impact on our local economy here, not to mention the wild salmon. They continue to decline. There's certainly a number of other issues around it. You could argue forestry, acidification of the ocean and all that. But the real crash that we've seen has happened since the fish farms have been in this area. And so I completely support your point of view, and thanks for that.
Great, thank you, Director Davis. Director Cornfield.
There we go. I'm fine now. So thank you guys for your presentation. Brianne, I've known for a while. Jamie, I've known for a long, long time. And like myself, he was born and raised on the island. Your letter that you sent to us, and for some reason I'm getting feedback on my audio. Can everybody hear okay?
Yes.
It's better now.
Okay. The statement you made was your objective is for healthy, thriving wild salmon populations. I want to know how removing fish farms is going to accomplish that. Because wild salmon populations, and I've been involved since before Brianne was born, longer than Sonora Island and the resorts were there. I was born and raised in the times of abundance, and I watched, which is why I quit work, went back to school, made that my career. If you look at the populations of wild salmon throughout our province, whether it's in the northern half, the central coast, and down here, it is a very complex issue. Most of it is driven by man's greed, overfishing, destruction of spawning habitat, the ocean itself and ocean health. We can anyone that's been on the coast for any length of time can remember the days when there wasn't whales in the inside. There wasn't much in the way of good, healthy oceans that were there that are needed. Removing fish farms is not going to cause the wild salmon population to explode. It has not proven to be an impact in the North Coast, where salmon populations were in steep decline, especially because of overfishing on the Skeena and other systems up there, and the ocean fishing in the Gulf of Alaska. So this is a very complex problem. And yes, I agree 100%. And I worked for the Ministry of Tourism. I worked managing wildland recreation for the government. All of these things are very important. The wild salmon populations are really important to maintaining wilderness tourism. And I'm a sports fisherman. I appreciate that kind of stuff. It's only when we all work together to solve the problem, and hence the provincial government had set up their task force that came around and met with people. And the idea is that it isn't about blame. It isn't about any one thing. There is a risk with fish farms. Agreeable, it's a risk. According to DFO's own staff, that risk is very minimal and is not going to help the at-risk populations of fish. It is only if we all come together and focus and force the government to address the issue, which is the wild salmon population decline, and where can we put our efforts and our resources to see that come about. And it's been a battle I've been in for well over 50 years to try and get those populations back up. But it's only when we all work together, not blame each other, but everybody get together, working together to make sometimes very tough choices, but to get that population up. So I have just removing fish farms will not cause the salmon population to rebound. It's not going to make more grizzly bears. It's not going to make more healthy forests. It's not going to make a more healthy ocean. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you, Director Cornfield. Director Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters, not only for your presentation, but your work and your passion in bringing this to us. You have my full support. I don't know about how the board will go on this one, but I would just like to ask you really specifically, what is your request of the board here today? I heard that you want us to support the DFO's decision to remove open pen fish farms from the Discovery Islands area. Is there anything else? And if that is the ask, do you have any specificity around it? I don't disagree with Charlie Cornfield's statement that removing fish farms will lead to an immediate massive rebound of wild salmon, but it certainly can't hurt. It's one of the many pieces that are required, as far as I understand, to give them a fighting chance, and you have my full support. But I'm asking just really clearly, what are you asking of the board here today?
Sure. Thank you, Nova. We, we don't disagree with the idea that it's the panacea or the fix, but our ask is that threats to wild salmon, which in turn are threats to our business and this industry, are removed. And our specific ask for the board is that you don't come out with a letter in support of fish farms in actual opposite kind of terms. We're asking that you support the government's decision and the consultations and the discussions that have happened within community and within First Nations, and write, if any letter is or position is taken by the board, that position represents the support for the government versus the opposite. Ross, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I would. I concur with that. I respectfully disagree slightly with Charlie. The Cohen inquiry 10 years ago attributed a relatively significant concern about the effects of fish farms on the science, and that was a multi-stakeholder decision made by much smarter people than me. And the DFO itself has come out with a decision to remove them. And so I'm suggesting that the regional district let the people that have the expertise make the decision and not stand in the way of that decision, because I think very smart people and well-informed people have made the correct decision under the circumstance, and I suggest that you support that decision.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee. Director Lee, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. I don't believe that this issue is simply about fish farms. Yesterday, I heard from the Shellfish Growers Association in the Comox Valley, and a DFO member was there. They've done considerable studies on the decline in shellfish aquaculture. And, you know, there's a lot of factors in the ocean that affect survivability of species in the ocean. And I think it was wrong of the government to come out with their decision without consulting in the local communities, without DFO presenting the data to the industries that rely on these decisions. They just did it from Ottawa, and I think that was very wrong to do that. I'm objecting to the lack of sharing information, because none of us on our board are biologists, and we don't know whether it's right or wrong. I've lived in the area, the region, since 1959, and when my dad went fishing, there was often lice on the salmon. It wasn't unusual, so I don't think that can be the only factor. I would just rather have the experts from DFO come and explain what is going on with these fish farms exactly. And I think it's an easy scapegoat to pick on them, but I don't think it's fair to that industry to pick on them without consulting at all. So
Okay.
That's my position.
Thank you. Director Mogul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. One is I think that Mr. Campbell's comments were, I believe, inaccurate in terms of the science. The Cohen Commission said, and I'm quoting from the Cohen Commission, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans should prohibit net 10 salmon farming in the Discovery Islands unless he or she is satisfied that such farms pose at most a minimal risk of serious harm to the health of migrating Fraser River sockeye salmon. In the years since that Cohen Commission, DFO has conducted extensive scientific research in response, and the results are, and I quote, the assessments concluded that the pathogens found in Atlantic salmon farms in Discovery Islands area pose no more than a minimal risk to migrating Fraser River sockeye salmon. That is the science. Now, having said that, I think we've gotten a bit off track because I do not believe that the two sides are that far apart. when the BC Salmon Farmers Association came to present to us last month, they are not asking for a reversal of the decision by Minister Jordan. That is not what they're asking for. What they are asking for is time, because the original concept by the federal government was to discontinue the open net salmon farms by 2025, not 2022. So all they are asking is for time to get their house in order. That's number one. Number two, what they're asking for is the ability to transfer the young smolts, or I don't know very much about it, but they want time to transfer those smolts to different pens so they won't all have to be killed. And the third thing they're asking for is a process similar to the Broughton Archipelago process, which ended up in an agreement amongst all of the stakeholders. That's what they're asking for, those three things. So in no way, shape, or form are they asking for a reversal of the decision. They're asking for three things. And I don't understand, and I'm a huge supporter of wilderness ecotourism. I participate. I don't understand how, and I'm going to call them two sides, can't come together on the three things that the Salmon Farm Association is asking for. Time, moving the smolts, and a process where all stakeholders come together to come up with a process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Molnoff. I don't see any further questions. So this time, I'd like to thank our presenters. I appreciate very much. And I don't see any further business arising, so I'll move forward. Again, I'll call a question on the presentation. Does anyone oppose?
Second.
Joe?
Mr. Chair, I would like a follow-up, and I don't know if you want to do that now or a new business at the end of the agenda.
Go ahead.
One question, we made a resolution some months back, I think in January. Does anyone have that on hand? I believe the nature of it was to ask for further information with regards to this decision. It was to state our lack of support for the lack of process, I think, that DFO went through before making its decision. Is that correct? To register our concern with the process. We didn't take an opinion one way or the other on support or lack of support of DFO's decision. Do I remember correctly?
I don't recall. I'd have to go back to staff on that, to Mr. Yates or CO.
I believe that was January.
I certainly don't remember offhand.
Well, my memory on that one was that in January we passed a resolution to this board stating our concern with the lack of process. I don't believe this board has taken a position one way or the other in support or non-support of DFO's decision, and I would like to then offer either a motion or a notice of motion at the chair's pleasure to that effect. What would the chair like at this time?
I take a notice of motion.
Should that come later in the meeting?
It can come out of new business if you want to.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, out of new business.
Mr. Chair, I think you're currently on receipt of the presentation.
Correct.
Any other questions? So on receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you again for the presenters. Appreciate it. On to item E, adoption of the minutes. Minutes of held April 14th.
You want to just give him a minute to leave here?
Okay, thank you.
I still see Ross Campbell is on. And now he's not. There we go. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So adoption of the minutes for April 14th. Motion
Move
received.
adoption.
Second.
Director Lee, Director Baker. Any errors, omissions? Here none. I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Any business rising from the minutes? No public considerations, no motion. On the chair's report, the only thing I was going to bring up about the minutes,
I believe
it seems the last few meetings, Lori, go ahead.
Sorry, I just jumped in there. It's your meeting, Chair. I just saw the notice of motion for new business, but I was wrong, and excuse me.
No problem. Okay, under Chair's report, I'm just going to bring up, just because the last few meetings have been clarifying on our minutes, who said what, who seconded what was recorded, etc. So just so everybody is well clarified on what goes on. Staff take the minutes. The minutes are recorded in a recording. After the meeting, staff will review the minutes and the recordings prior to publishing to ensure their accuracy. So, you know, they're there. They're there for you as directors. If you feel something isn't correct in the minutes, that, you know, you can look on the recording yourself and have a look. So just kind of like a food for thought. Have a look at your minutes if you feel there is something missing from them. So other than that, that's all I got for Chair's report.
Move receipt of Chair's report.
Yep, seconder.
Second.
Thank you. Director Lee and Director Cornfield, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. The consent calendar committee chair reports. Electoral Area Service Committee held on April 14th. Director Abram.
Second.
Director
Second.
Lee. And CEO.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Anything to add? Hearing none, I'll call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Truscona Gardens, minutes to April 14th, motion received.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
The Director Wally and Director Lee. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Under staff reports, development variance permit DV1D18, Lamotang.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, seconder. Director Wally and the CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Kill. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this application is in Area D. We received 10 letters of objection to the lowering of the rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3.5 meters. And I received a lot of blowback from neighbors about the proposed development, and the recommendation is going to be to deny.
Thank you, Director Lee. Any further discussion? On receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. On item B, development permit DV.
Move item B that the development permit DV1D18 La Montagne be denied.
Director Lee and Director Abrams seconded.
Davis.
Any further discussion? I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 2, Black Creek Oyster Bay Water System.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, Director Davis, the CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair, from staff.
Yep. Any discussion? Seeing none.
Well, this is another request from Area D. We're attempting to match the contribution from Area C, which also participates in this water system. And we're doing a planned replacement of more modern meter equipment for the Black Creek Oyster Bay system from our gas tax fund. So this is a $30,000 request from Area D's gas tax to begin replacing meters that were installed in 1992.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram.
Yeah, just clarity on that last comment from Director Lee. The matching of Area C, the Area C she's talking about is in the Comox Valley Regional District.
Yes.
That's not Area C. Discovery
That's
Islands.
right. This is Black Creek Oyster Bay.
Good point, Director Abram.
You should pay anyway, Jim.
Okay.
No thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on receipt? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. On to B,
Move B.
Director Lee. Seconder,
Second.
Director Wally, I believe.
No, that was Director Abram.
Dave, Director Abram. It's hard to tell his voices. Thank you. I'll call question. Area directors only. Is anyone opposed? Say none, carried. Item 3, UBCM membership renewal. Motion receive. Director
Move
Abram.
receipt. Evans.
Director Colburn. The CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was some discussion at the last meeting about our membership renewal at UBCM, and as we dug into the archives, we found that we do a variety of things. We're not consistent in terms of just automatic paying or bring it to the board at their request. So we've provided 2 alternatives for the board, that either we automatically renew annually or staff can bring the option to renew annually to the board.
Thank you. Director Cornfield.
He's muted.
Director
You're
Cornfield.
muted,
Oh,
Charlie.
darn, they're going to add that to my total of muted starts. And I said it so eloquently too. Everyone missed it. Is this paid for out of general admin, or how is the membership apportioned to all
General,
areas?
General admin, yeah.
Okay,
Actually,
so that puts
Oh,
six,
sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this is paid for by the electoral areas. It is part of the electoral area administration service. So the regional district's membership is for the electoral areas. The municipalities have their own memberships, and so it is paid for, in this case, by the electoral areas only.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Appreciate that for the clarification. That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you. Director Anderson.
Thank you. When this came up last time, there was a question posed about whether there was previous direction from the board on this one. I don't question the fact that there has been varying practices, but my question is, in the digging, was there a resolution found from some years back that directed that this be renewed automatically every year? And if so, was there any other direction that counteracted that? And if not, I suggest we stick with that practice unless we've said otherwise. So I'm just asking the staff if that was found.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we did try to research this. We could find no motion of the board authorizing us to automatically pay these invoices every year.
Okay, thank you. Director Adams.
Sorry, I will take that down. Thank you.
Okay. Director Abram.
Yeah, just on the comments from, I believe, Director Cornfield about who pays, and Tom's answer basically being that is coming out of electoral area administration. So I'm just a curious question. If that's the case, why are we having all directors vote on something that is purely being paid for by the electoral area administration? Either way, I'm going to move. Either way, I'm going to move A when we get to it. But go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond, the motion currently in front of the board is simply to receive a report, and all such motions are typically voted on by the whole board. If there are subsequent motions regarding payment or lack thereof, then that would be an electoral area matter, not a full board matter.
Okay,
Yep.
my mistake. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any
On
further
receipt?
questions. On receipt, call questions. Anyone opposed? Say none, carried.
I would like to move option A.
Second.
Director Abram, Director Anderson. Do I have any discussion? Director Abram?
No, I just think that this is, I mean, we receive more from UBCM each year than we would ever pay in fees. So I think it's well worthwhile just from that perspective. But as an advocacy organization and as an SRD organization that has adopted advocacy as one of our strategic priorities, I think it would be very wise of us to continue with EBCM and AVICC and the other realm. But EBCM is our organization, and we've strived to have 100% participation. I wouldn't want to be the one person that pulled, or the one group that pulled up.
Okay, thank you, Director Averill. I don't see any other speakers. I'll call question on the motion. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 4, Refuge for Cove Boardwalk Project funding options. Motion received.
So moved.
Director Averill, seconder.
Second.
Director Wally, thank you. CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if I could, this came to me from the Refuge Cove community, and I certainly couldn't answer the technical questions that arose out of that discussion. So I referred it to staff, to I believe Mike, and to Dave and Tom to please find out. And we have the motion that is before us, which is that staff provide an additional report information on this particular item as to whether or not there are funding options available for them. Where it comes from us or ICE-T or province or whatever is not a concern. It's just a matter of finding out where.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on receipt? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B, the report be prepared on the options.
So moved.
Second.
Director Lee. Any further discussion? Call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 5, Clues First Nation addition to reserve. Motion received.
So move.
Move receipt, Evans.
Director Evans, Director Lee, second. Thank you. And I'll go to CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This came from the East recommendation, so nothing to add from staff.
Thank you. Any discussion? Director Adams.
Thank you. One comment and one question. And the comment is not speaking specifically to this application, but more to the additions to reserve in general, in that there have been challenges when the additions to reserve are separate from the existing reserve in regards to servicing and infrastructure and just continuity of connection from one area to the other. So that's my general comment as to whether there are any concerns of that where this is separate from and not directly in addition to an existing reserve. My question, though, is that with Squirrel Cove Road going through this area, will there be a requirement for an agreement for road access through the proposed reserve? And then who is responsible for maintenance and servicing? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I don't have that answer, but we can certainly, bring that back. I know Tina has been working with the Clues First Nation to find out as much information as she can, but I doubt we have this information on hand, and we'll have to come back to the board with this information.
I expect I can speak to that.
Director Anderson can speak to that.
I haven't looked into it specifically in terms of the paperwork, but from a practical point of view, and I've looked at that property historically, both on paper and on the ground, and it's a hooked property that does exist on both sides of the public road, but it is a public maintained, dedicated road maintained by Ministry of Highways, and so I don't expect that the change in ownership or the change in designation of those lands would in any way affect the ongoing Ministry of Highways maintenance and ownership of that roadbed. wouldn't be, I think, an issue in the slightest.
Well, thank you, Director Anderson, but the reason why I raised the question is it has become an issue in other jurisdictions, and where it then raises the issue of permission to access that road, even though it may be ministry or local road. So it's more posing that question, and hopefully they can, if there are no concerns, great. But if there are, we should know that up front.
I appreciate the heads up.
Thank you. Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. And just speaking follow up to Director Adams, and for Directors Anderson's benefit, you cannot obtain a statutory right-of-way across reserve lands. So you better make sure that that road is excluded, period. Otherwise, you can't get one through. And that's reality of reserve status lands. The other thing I was through to staff. This has come forward, but in the original proposal, and when we dealt with it at the First Nations Relations Committee, there has been no stated use of what First Nation wants to do on that property, even though staff have approached them or have reached out at least to try and do the contact. But there was no, they've yet to respond, and I wondered if that response has been done, because it's one thing to say, sure, move it to reserve, great, no problem. However, when it reaches reserve status, you no longer have any zoning or control over what happens on that land. And so under the addition to reserve federal policy, there's supposed to be that discussion, and there is a requirement to consult with local government. And yet it seems to have been one way, unless staff has received information in the last 2-3 weeks. I'd like to know before I vote on and then add to reserve, whether or not we know what the purpose is for the reserve.
So, Mr. Chair, other than what Tina has provided to the First Nations Relations Committee, and in terms of finding out their intent, what they're going to do, I have no greater knowledge to that unless Tina has something additional to offer.
Okay.
Or Renee.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair and Directors. What we know so far is that the reason for the addition to reserve is that it's of historical significance to the Klahoose First Nation, and at this current time they do not have plans for development.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the map here, and the text of the proposal that had come forward to us previously, and I note that they're asking for 14.3 acres, which excludes the road allowance that's mapped through it. And I could be wrong on this, but it doesn't appear that they're trying to acquire the road itself, because otherwise that would be factored into the 14.3. You can see it on there and on the map below. So just a comment. Obviously, it should be confirmed, but.
Okay, Director Davis. Director Lee.
I would think that we would want to have a normal addition to reserve consultation through the Canadian government about what is being proposed. There's a couple things that I think should, the public interest overall should be considered, and that is the wharfs at Squirrel Cove, which are used by people from all over the province that can come and dock at those. They used to be able to. Last time we had a public hearing over there, there were submissions from the yacht clubs around BC that they wanted a place to seek refuge if they needed to and dock there. And the other thing was, I recall at the hearing that we had, 10 years ago it was, but there was a little store probably within that reserve area that was owned by a non-Indigenous person, and I don't know what the status of that would be. So these things we can at least ask in case we're transgressing on somebody's private property interests there. So I think we should ask the agency about those few things that I recall. So I think that it would be, we might not get the answers we want to hear, but we can at least ask and do our part.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other first-time speakers? If not, I'll go to Director Anderson and then Cornfield. Seeing none, Director Anderson.
Thank you. Just for clarity, are we on A or B right now?
You're still on A.
Great. I appreciate the road issue being raised. It is not one that occurred to me before, and I'd be very surprised if it is an issue. However, in abundance of caution, I would certainly support when we get to B, having it be conditional upon that road, maintaining its public status. With regards to the government wharf and the store, I know that area well. It is not part of the lands in question. The government wharf is immediately to the west of this addition to reserve land. That is a government wharf, not a private wharf. And then immediately to the west of that is the lot where the restaurant and store is located, and that is indeed private property. And as long as the road is maintained open, that would not be directly impacted in terms of, clearly as a neighbor it would be impacted, but not direct land ownership change of any kind. And just in the most general of terms, I, of course, would like the feds to lead a community consultation process and CLUS to be intimately involved, but I don't think that that's something the regional district wants to get involved with, and not something that I want to particularly get involved with leading. Certainly, this is an interest of the nation there who has lived there from time immemorial. These are very important lands to them. I certainly have had some discussion with them about their acquisition and their potential uses, and that's not for me to share because the community certainly hasn't come to any conclusion about that. But I have no interest in our board trying to stand in the way of Clahous purchasing back and having land use control over lands that, traditionally the village spanned this whole bay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. No one is opposed, or at least I'm not opposed to them acquiring land, especially in their traditional territory. Quite the contrary. It's part of the Truth and Reconciliation process. However, it's still our role as directors in this regional district to look after the public's interest as well. And so the issue on the road is just to make sure that it does not include the road, make sure the road is of sufficient width for now and in the future, because that may also be a infrastructure connection one day. It's also to confirm the accessibility of those docks, and unfortunately the information that is provided is at a scale you can't go down and look. And if you zoom in on the satellite imagery that is proposed, you'll see through the yellow that the yellow goes across the road in the image. I don't believe that was its intent, but it should be clarified and confirmed prior to the board making a decision. So if there is a shift where the road is shown being linked in the bottom, or at least property coming into the road surface itself, what happens if there's a shift at the top corner where the docks are? So it's to make sure that the legal survey adequately reflects those. So it's not a matter of questioning them. It's to know what they want to do. If it's strictly cultural and historical significance, great. That's wonderful. No, nobody's asking to say, well, what are you planning on doing this in the next 10 years or so? It's just looking out for the public interest. And that's what our role is. So there's no offense implied or intended or not wanting to facilitate First Nations acquisition of historical and cultural lands. It's just to make sure that everybody's values, interests, and concerns are addressed.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further hands up. So on receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item B.
I'd like to move a slightly modified B, Mr. Chair, based on the great conversation that we've had.
Okay, go ahead.
That a letter of support be provided to Indigenous Services Canada for the addition to reserve application by the Clues First Nation, subject to the public road and government wharf continuing to be public access.
Okay, do I have a seconder?
Or continuing to have public access status.
I didn't, I'm sorry. Somebody said second. Seconder?
Mogul.
Director Mogul, thank you. And I have discussion, Director Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I appreciate the amending on the fly. I will not be supporting it. I think this should be deferred pending confirmation of the ownership of the road and accessibility, confirmation of accessibility to the wharfs. And I know we've had some discussion about intended use. I'm not really that concerned about what, knowing that they may not have any concrete plans at this point, but between the access ownership for road and wharves, I think that needs to be clarified before we do any letters of support. Thank you.
Second.
Director Adams, are you making a motion to defer?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you. Second by Director Cornfield. So on defer. Director Abram, you had a question?
No, I just wanted to add my voice to that deferral. I think there's enough issues there. We do need to defer it until we get a complete, comprehensive answer concerning all of the utilities, things like hydro, if there's any water pipes, sewer pipes, etc. In addition to the road, the ditching, the proper width of 66 feet. All of those things need to be confirmed. It's not just a matter of, yes, it's good.
Okay.
We need to have it confirmed by the appropriate authority. So I'm going to support the deferral.
Okay. Thank you. On the deferral, Director Adams, you have your hand up again?
Yes, I do, Chair. Thank you. And I was remiss in not thanking Councillor Cornfield for his comments, and just would like to echo them that the Klahoose, this is traditional territory. I have fully support the application. We just need to ensure that this is in the best interest of all parties and avoid some of the challenges that have been experienced in other jurisdictions around the province and across the country. Certainly hope that we can get a swift resolution so that this can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call question on the deferral. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. On to number 6, wood chipping, Community Resilience Investment Grant. Motion receives report. Director Colburn.
Receipt.
Director Abram and the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Sean will speak to this for us.
Yep, Mr. Koopman.
So through the chair to our regional board, the purpose of this staff report is to address one of the motions that was passed regarding this issue, on your March 24th meeting. Regarding the second motion, which the staff report does not address, staff did make the UBCM aware that the directors from electoral area C and B would like to have a call with UBCM to discuss this matter, but personnel at UBCM have been busy with the March intake and evaluations of the $10 million Fire Smart Economic Recovery Grant, as well as this being the time of year that community wildfire protection plans that were developed under last year's CRI grant were submitted for review. Given that a month has gone by since this amendment was requested, we thought best to bring the information for at least one of these motions to you with an update, and the staff report is in front of you for any questions.
And Director Abram.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Sean, because that was going to be my question. And you addressed it very well, because I know I made the motion to, go with the whatever with UBCM, but I also added to that that we also follow up with the conference call, and that didn't show up in the report as presented as the actual motions, but you did cover it just now by saying that that's still on the horizon. So I'm hoping that we can have that meeting. This is an extremely important issue on the islands, Quadra and Cortez. Nova can speak for that, but I'm just saying that the people on the island are very concerned about having such a wonderful program polluted, basically, by having to remove the chips to another facility, which would be Campbell River or Fox Valley, at great expense, at great carbon footprint, and it's going to also eat up the money that we're putting into our solid waste program on that side of the water. So it just doesn't make any sense, and I can't understand why UBCM is not having a little better luck with the wildfire service people in making them understand how important this is. So, I'm glad to hear that we're going to still have the conference call. I hope you will include me in that, Sean. I would like to be there.
Yep, Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. As I seconded Jim's motion, because this is different from large-scale disposal of woody debris and reducing wildfire risk. I think what was being asked, as my understanding was, that if it comes in onto a residential property where it's in your own best interest to reduce the risk to wildfire. But if you're going to have a chipper there and you're going to chip up the debris, and if you can use those chips as mulch in your vegetable garden, or use a portion of it to line your surface of your access road, what's wrong with that? And in terms of, if you use it as mulch in your garden or around the edge of your house, you're not threatening. I mean, it's not the same as an industrial scale and leaving piles of chips that are there. And I think we're talking, Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking small scale amounts that a local homeowner would use to improve their property. And I think the way it is written right now, it has a far bigger impact because it excludes the ability to use small amounts. So I don't think that that's very wise either. And the answer that the BC Wildfire Service is the experts in this. Yeah, if they don't have all of the information in terms of volume, sizes, and locations, how can they make a technical expertise judgment? So I think it needs to be explored further.
Thank you. Director Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I completely can echo the sentiments of Director Cornfield and Abram. I won't repeat them. I did put a motion in the chat that I would like to put on the table after this is received. And just speaking in advance of that, if chips cannot be deposited right at people's roadside, if that's what they want, I guarantee you if they were put in a big pile somewhere on the island, they'd be gone within the week. I mean, the contractors would come and scoop them all up there. It's very, very valuable here. But shy of that being an option, and I'm very disappointed with the response that we got, and the lack of flexibility by UBCM on this to not think at a regional and sub-regional scale and make exceptions and trials. But given that that's where they're at for this year, and I don't expect that they will change for 2021, I do have a motion I would like to make for our own internal consideration for this year, Mr. Chair, when we get there. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any further.
Yeah, I've got mine up.
Dr. Abram?
Yeah, just real quick, I'd just like to thank Director Cornfield and Dr. Anderson for the comments. We are talking small scale. This is a commodity. This is not a giant industrial waste pile that's going to self-combust. So, the Wildfire Service, I do not believe they've got the whole picture, and I do not believe they are acting in our best interests, and UBCM should be pushing that. And I hope that we see Director Anderson's motion that we'll be able to support it, because we definitely need to pursue this.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on receipt? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Director Anderson.
Thank you, and I would welcome a friendly from Director Abram if you can think of anything on the fly here, but I'd like to put forward that the SRD staff work with the CSWM staff to explore options to provide an acceptable on-island wood chip disposal location at the Cortes Island Solid Waste Transfer Station for 2021 and beyond, as was done last year at the Hornby Island Transfer Station.
Seconder.
Second.
Director Abram.
Thank you. So speaking just very briefly to this, we were informed at CSWM board meeting a while back that in fact they had done a very small scale trial at Hornby this year and that it was received well. Now I do believe at the Hornby transfer station there is some very small historical composting kind of trial that they just mix with a bobcat there. Just before the wood chip program last year, I did reach out to CSWM staff, to Jesse, to see if there was some way of, receiving it to meet the grant qualifications to receive it at an acceptable depot, and either compost it there or immediately disperse it to the contractors and homeowners on the island. It was just too short of a time period, and he didn't think there was enough space. But I expect with some creative collaboration between our staff and their staff, we may well be able to find a way of doing that. And if Jim or any other members from other regions want to make a friendly amendment to this, perhaps there's ways of creating an acceptable disposal option through the CSWM, even if it is for a couple of week time period on some municipal land somewhere, such that it would meet the grant criteria and keep the chips in the communities. Thank you.
Cool. Dr. Abram.
Yes, thank you, and I thank you for the opportunity to add a friendly. It's very difficult because you've specifically said the solid waste transfer station. We don't have one, but at the end of it, where it says Hornby Islands Transfer Station, I would add, and that further options be explored with Quadra Island. Leave
Happily.
it completely open.
Happily accept.
Okay, I'll accept it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Davis.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to work with the friendlies, but I would like to add TASIS to that too. I realize I spoke to this last time, and I have a real problem with driving wood chips all over the island. And there's certainly a demand for them in town here. I mean, we still use them around our boulevards, you know, to cover up invasive plants and all that. And personally speaking, I use them around my blueberries because it's one of the things that you need to use to grow them well. So, yeah, I don't know what to say at this point, but please add me to it.
Can I just suggest, Mr. Chair, that we put a period at the end of location so that the SRD staff work with CSW staff to explore options to provide an acceptable
Wood
scrap
chip
on island wood chip disposable locations within the SRD boundary.
This is why we don't make motions on the fly.
Understood. And yet we also need some capacity for us to try to be directors here. So I appreciate the fine line we're drawing.
I'll say, I was going to suggest within the SRD, so that's fine. Let's carry on. So then the motion is that SRD staff work with CSWM staff to explore options to provide acceptable on-island wood chip disposal locations within the SRD boundary. Is that all you need?
So just take out on island.
Well, we are an island over here too, but.
Okay. And the rest of it disappears. Okay, is that okay with Director Anderson
Yes, thank you.
and Director Abram?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Chair.
So on the motion, call question, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 7, Craft Hockeyville competition. Motion received.
Move receipt. Moglove.
Second.
Moglove and Cornfield, thank you, and the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to add to this.
Thank you. Any discussion?
What's the item there, Mr. Chair? I can't see it.
Craft Hockeyville competition.
Okay.
Tom, you want to put the agenda back up? Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else on receipt. I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seen none, carried. And item B, the Regional District enter 2022 Craft Hockeyville competition for Strathcona Gardens area.
I'll move B. Moglove.
Move B.
Moglove, you haven't seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Call question. This is Cam River and Electoral Area D only. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Item 8, Regional Board Chair expense reimbursement. Motion received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Move receipt.
Trying to think of Abram and Cornfield and the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll consider this, if the board will, a bit of a housekeeping change to the expense reimbursement bylaw. So COVID has kind of brought this a little bit to light, even more so that there's a need to have in-person meetings with the chair, the CAO, provincial ministry folks, some webcast Teams meetings with community groups, First Nations, Connected Coast. As we know, there isn't great connectivity throughout the regional district, and it's not possible to have all these meetings via Teams. So the chair is required to come into the office to conduct these meetings, and the current bylaw doesn't allow for the chair to claim for mileage and travel time, which I don't believe was the intent of the board at the time. Our previous chair lived in Campbell River, and it was a bit of a moot point, even though it was an issue with her as well. So I'm asking the board for the authority to make an amendment and bring forward these housekeeping issues, bring this forward in a bylaw.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have mine.
Director Lee?
The motion itself doesn't mention in the office. I mean, maybe we should specify that, or should we?
Well, that's a good question, Director Lee. So what this is just a motion to allow me to make the amendments to that bylaw, and then I'll make the amendments to make sure those instances are taken care of within the bylaw.
So, yeah, so, I mean, these are official meetings at the office or at an office. They're not on the golf course or anything like that. They're in the office.
Yeah, that's the intent. Yeah, but again, I'll make changes to the actual bylaw, and you'll see those changes. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on receipt? Seeing none on receipt, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item B.
Move B.
Director Abram.
Second.
Director Lee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item 9, federal gas tax program. Proposed changes. Motion received.
I'll move receipt. Moglove.
Thank you, Director Mogul.
Second,
Seconder.
Evans.
Director Evans, thank you. And CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll have Mr. Harmston speak to this for us.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, so we recently received correspondence from UBCM regarding the upcoming change, or an update to the program. They have some advertising requirements for new signage. There's also speaks to a potential to increase the amount of the transfer should another unrelated bill pass in for the province. And then there's also a note that they're concerned about some of the carry forward balances from the last one, so they'll be in communication to make sure there's plans in place to spend the money by 2024. Yeah, that's all I have for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wally for the question.
Yes, Mr. Chair, a question to staff. So is the government proposing then they're going to claw it back if it's not spent? Is that the intent?
Yeah, they foresee some new regulations coming in, so I suspect it would be within the next agreement. But yeah, they do allude to the new requirements coming forward to ensure the money gets spent.
So are we talking about spending 100% of what our balance is, or a portion of it?
Yeah, that would be 100%.
Okay, I better get spending.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a, Director Wally, though, a bit of a idle threat scare. I don't think there's really any chance they're going to claw it back, but what I think they'd like to see is plans for allocation.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, I believe they had the same language in the last contract that 7 years ago now. So, and then it just got rolled into this one. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none on receipt. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Thank you. Item 10, Recreation Service Feasibility Study. Motion received.
Move receipt. Moglove.
Director Moglove, seconder.
Second, Evans.
Director Evans, thank you. And the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to add on this.
Thank you. And questions, Director Anderson.
Thank you. I certainly don't have any opposition to doing this work. I know some version of this has been before the board at least once, if not twice before. But my concern is the prioritization of looking into this regional service over and above ones that we, I believe, have strategically prioritized to look into. I remember in our strategic planning sessions and in previous presentations and reports to the board, consideration of regional services, both for housing and transportation. And I would like to see where we're at with those ones before advancing one that I don't think was a board strategic priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From Area A's point of view, we do not want a regional feasibility study to look into a reserve for recreational services, because we don't want a regional recreation service. So in opposition to this.
Yep. Director Abrams.
Yeah, and I'd have to echo Director Wally's comments. I'm not interested in participating in a regional feasibility study and using the money that's in that reserve for this particular purpose, certainly for other purposes as they come up. But we have been through this, I think, as was mentioned, at least once, if not twice, and I think it's failed both times, so I am not in favor of it.
Joe? Any further discussion on receipt?
Yes.
Director O'Neill?
Yes, I'm not in favor of this. Area D currently participates with Campbell River on the Strathcona Gardens Commission. We're putting in well over $500,000 a year into that service. We have a well-organized, efficient system already, and I'm sure there's better ways to spend $50,000. We have other problems in our region other than, you know, the cost of recreation, and I think that we need to spend that money in areas where it's more needed.
Joe? Director Davis?
Yeah, I just want to concur with the previous speakers. I don't really agree with spending that money in this way, and I appreciate the idea of synergies, but I think we have been negotiating that in the past, just in an ad hoc fashion, and that works well for us at this point. So thanks.
Director Baker?
I agree that we should spend the money on the study. Areas like here in Sayward, for example, where we have more use from outside our municipality than we do inside, I think support is needed, and that feasibility study may actually show that. So I support this.
Any other first-time speakers?
Chair, we're on receipt just to, there's no motion to do anything yet. We're on receipt, just to make sure everyone knows that.
That's correct. Anything else on receipt? I've got second-time speakers, it's Anderson, Wally.
You got
and
first time me.
And first time Charlie, just come on. Go ahead, Director Cornfield.
Yeah, just I think it's worth exploring. Conversely, the other option open would be to put a non-resident fee structure in place. And I think that becomes problematic, and I don't necessarily think that that's the best move to make, but it's about how do we all share in providing services that we all use. And I certainly agree with the director from Sayward that when you look at a regional feasibility study, it is not just intended for Campbell River and beyond, but rather looking at the region and is there other areas where this applies. Like I had not considered Sayward until the rep brought it up. Thank you.
Is there any other first-time speakers? If not, I've got a second list. I don't see any other first one. I'm going to chime in just for a second. I would support this 100% because we are a region. We're not area B, C, and D or Sayward or Campbell River. We're a region. This is what it is. I think it would be money well spent on looking into.
Point of order, can we wait for debate until we actually have a motion on the floor that asks us to do something? We're on receipt.
Thank you. So you got second-time speakers, so I'm going to wait until after receipt. So I'm going to call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? See nobody opposed, carried. Item B, that up to $50,000 to be authorized to be spent from the Regional Feasibility Study Reserve Fund.
Move B.
Thank you, Director McGrath.
Second, Colburn.
Director Colburn. And we'll have discussion. Director Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of points I'd like to raise. First of all, that in the past when this item was brought up, we had the results from surveys that were done at the Strathcona Gardens about how many people who aren't Campbell River Area D residents actually use the facility, and it was found that it's minimal, the amount of people who use it from outside. The other point I want to bring forward is that it's my understanding, and staff can confirm this if they would please, that we can't fund a recreation center like in the village of Sayward or Gold River or Tassus or Zabalos unless the regional district owns the facility. So I don't know why we would think that we're going to get some funds from the regional district when that's not the way it works.
Well, this would just be a study to fund a study to look at if there's any economies amongst the regional recreation facilities within the region. So I think items as you bring up there would be included in the study to look at ownership of facilities, use of facilities, all kinds of things. But this is just for a study to look at those options and come up with answers to questions like you have.
All right, thank you, Dave, for that. And if I just might, Mr. Chair, my point is not that there's anything wrong with staff bringing back a report that confirms what I'm saying here, but we're spending $50,000 to do it.
Okay, thank you. Director Anderson.
Thank you. At risk of reading what I said already, I don't begrudge this being looked at. I do begrudge it happening before our previously agreed upon strategic priorities. We have at least 2 other services, regional services, that this board has prioritized investigation and has looked at previously. And so I would like to move the deferral motion I put in the chat, please, which is defer until such time as the board has information about the previously prioritized regional housing and transportation services, because I don't think we can do a bunch at the same time.
Do I have a second?
And those are already in the works.
Do I have a seconder?
Second, Davis.
Okay. Motion has been deferred.
No, we have to vote on the deferral.
No.
Correct. Discussion on deferral.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
My
Okay, so
hand's up too.
Just hang on, guys. I've got 12 hands up. We're talking the different motion now. There's a deferred motion now.
April.
At the top, all right. Director Baker on deferred motion.
I don't believe this should be deferred. This is a very important issue for the village of Sayward. So I'd like to see this go ahead.
Thank you. Director Mogul.
I'm opposed to deferral.
I have a question, but that's fine.
All
Director
right,
Evans.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is an important discussion to be had now. Just for the directors, the motion is up to 50,000. So we weren't sure what the cost would be, considering what the consultant and the kind of engagement that's going to happen. But this is really centered around where can we have efficiencies that we maybe have not yet identified. Things have changed a lot. We know that even from the reports that we've been receiving from our own staff at the SRD about usage and changes in how people consume recreation. The time
order. This is a deferral motion, and the only discussion is time and place.
Yes, I'm not in favor. Sorry, I am in favor of deferral.
Joe?
I'm not in favor of deferral. Sorry, I'm in favor of not deferring.
On the deferral, Director Cornfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, because it is an appropriateness and time and place, and there's been no time and place for as part of this motion, or where or how long. And in terms of appropriateness, not sure whose phone just went off. Thank you. But the appropriateness, I don't believe it's there. I agree with the other comments that it's up to 50. To say that it would preclude doing studies that are already underway, I would say that that's not true. So I haven't seen any appropriateness as to why it should be if their expressed reason was that we have 2 other studies, which is the mover of the deferral motion, brought that part into it, but there's been no limit as to put on it. So I would say that the motion itself doesn't meet the tests.
Joe, Director Colburn.
Hi, thank you for that, Chair. So I'm actually not in favor of the deferral at this time. I don't think that staff would have brought a recommendation to us that they could not do in as well as the other 2 studies. So I trust that they have the staffing in place in order to make this happen. And so I would be willing to vote on the motion instead of the deferral. I'll not be supporting it.
Okay. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I'm not totally convinced that we should be having the discussion on deferral, but I'll throw my 2 bits in and maybe just ask staff for a clarification of where this funding's coming from for the 50,000 and what community is paying the bulk of that 50,000.
Well, it will come out of the regional feasibility study function, which we all areas contribute to. So, yeah.
Okay.
Not equitable contribution.
Well, it's assessment based, so.
Okay, we're going to wrap up deferral on Director Abram.
Thank you. I thought you forgot me. I am not in favor of deferral because I'm not in favor of the motion. I would sooner just see us get to the motion and defeat it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call question on deferral. Is anyone opposed?
I'm
I'm
opposed.
opposed.
Kerr opposed.
I'm opposed. Evans.
Cornfield.
Evans opposed to deferral.
Okay, so I got Moglove, Evans, Cornfield, Baker,
Kerr.
Adams.
Colburn.
Adams, Colburn, Unger. That's 8.
Out of 13.
14.
Out of
Yeah.
14. We got 14 now.
Okay, all right.
That's defeated. So on the original motion, I'm going to call question.
No. We can't
Anyone
speak. to it.
opposed?
I didn't have an opportunity to speak because we were on receipt.
Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
we're now actually on the motion and that's, okay. So I'm going to be supporting the motion that's on the floor, the feasibility study. And I just wanted to address some of the concerns that Director Lee raised in terms of, from my point of view, one of the things that this will look at is the synergies between the recreational facilities in the city of Campbell River and the regional district. I'll give you one example of where there may be more costs being more being spent than needs to be spent. So I'm a member of both the Sportsplex in Campbell River and the Strathcona Gardens, and so there's 2 different systems. So right now there's a booking system, 2 separate booking systems. If I want to book a class at the Sportsplex, I go on one system. If I want to book a pool lane, I go on a different system, and it's the same website, it's the same company. So there's just one small example. Another example is that the city of Campbell River is looking at maybe expanding the Sportsplex and whether we expand the weight room. Well, if the Strathcona Gardens has a weight room and they expand the weight room, then why would the city of Campbell River expand the weight room? So there's all these different kind of synergies that could happen. And I would assure that the electoral area directors who are not interested in participating, this study will end up, for the most part, affecting the recreational facilities in the Campbell River and Area D, trying to find synergies and economies of scale. But I am really pleased to hear that the director from Sayward and from Gold River, and I think those are the 2 that I heard, are very much looking forward to joining in on this to see whether there are recreational opportunities on a regional level that we could pursue. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McGough. Director Baker.
That's it. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Director Colburn.
Sorry about that. But to take my hand down.
Okay. Director Adams.
Thank you, Chair. And as the Chair of Strathcona Gardens, and as I mentioned there, I do want to recognize the significant contribution that Director Lee, on behalf of Area D, contributes to the programming and operations and management of Strathcona Gardens. I think what this is doing is just looking for how there could be efficiencies so that we're getting the best bang for the buck on recreational services. But it also reaches out to the other areas, as Director Mogul just mentioned. If we don't look, we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Anderson.
Thank you. I do really request of this board that we follow our strategic priorities. I don't share Director Colburn's confidence in our ability to do a whole lot of things at the same time. I see a lot of projects that aren't getting the attention that this board has directed. And I'm wondering if there isn't a way, because I completely understand the desire to have the two big facilities in Campbell River have great synergy. I am requesting of the board members who are in support of this motion to strongly consider whether there is some other way of commissioning a study jointly participated in between the City of Campbell River and the Strathcona Gardens Service to look at synergies between those facilities. I don't begrudge that at all, but I'm respectfully requesting that you don't bring all of us and all of our collective funds along when this is not a priority that we have identified.
Thank you. Director Abram.
Yeah, ditto on that, and thank you for calling on me finally. The issue, as I think it was Director Wally mentioned, the surveys that were done basically showed the amount of use was minuscule. It was surveyed at less than 1% for Sayward and Area C, and use of the Campbell River facilities. Director Cornfield made the motion or the comment that I would make. You want to charge extra for out of area? Fine, do it. Used to be that way. We used to pay extra. All you have to do is pay a couple extra bucks or whatever, and you're fine. But you're not charging this incredible amount of money just to, and then who knows what we're going to pay once it's been studied. I think staff could come up, like Director Anderson, just with the Sportsplex, the Strathcona Gardens, the City of Campbell River. Let them do a study of whether or not they can not duplicate things, make things better, but don't drag us all into it through a feasibility study. I do not support the feasibility study at all.
Okay, thank you. And just for all directors, I have a speakers list here. I've got numerous people on it, so I'll get to you when your name's on the list. Thank you. Next speaker, Director Wally.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe my hand is up.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that there's no need to spend $50,000 to get cooperation between Area D and Campbell River. We already contribute to Strathcona Gardens over $500,000 a year. We also have cooperative attitudes about sharing staff when the outdoor pool, for example, is open and our pool is closed. Our staff move over to the outdoor pool and get paid by Campbell River. The staff at the Strathcona Gardens Commission, they work very cooperatively. There is no need to spend $50,000 to have synergies or have, better aligned programs. I mean, there's no need for it. And we did work together on the booking system. We did use the same booking system, and we helped each other to implement it. So I think this is a waste of money. I don't agree with it. I don't want Area D to be participating in any further facilities outside of Strathcona Gardens. Area D also provides $250,000 a year in beautiful recreation parks and trails that all of the region uses for free. We pay the bill for that. It needs to be considered that we're doing, the lion's share for an area our size to provide recreation opportunities for people in the region. And I don't agree with spending more money because we're not going any further. And the bylaw is going to stay the same. Bylaw 1213, the establishment bylaw, for Strathcona Gardens is all that Area D is interested in participating in.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Cornfield, Davis, and Baker, and then we'll wrap it up. Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support it. I think there's a lot more to recreation as Strathcona Gardens and the Sportsplex in Area D. And Director Lee, just so that you didn't forget or you don't think that people noticed, you contributed to the operations of the Centennial Pool. You've contributed to operations of our boat ramps. You've contributed to all kinds of things through grants and aid.
Yeah, and I have control.
Yep, it's okay. Please, I'm just thanking you for that. But there's more than just facilities. If you look at sports fields, playing fields, the new all-weather turf field, and you look at where do the kids come from that use those fields? Where do they come from? They come from the outlying areas too. That was like a $7 million facility that was put up, and we've asked for nothing. We're talking about a feasibility study to see how what the synergies are. Gold River has some pretty amazing facilities, but think about the trails and the trail systems that we talked about making the ATV trail and linking all the different communities by ATV routes. That's a recreation thing, and it's a regional type activity. But no, we haven't brought those together. We haven't consolidated. We haven't even looked at what it would look like and how would we do things. So I see this as a regional recreation feasibility study as just that. It's a regional recreation study that we haven't tied it and said, well, it's just the Strathcona Gardens and just this or just that.
Okay.
And I think to have that study is well worth it. And I fully believe that staff are quite capable of, if they don't think that this is possible with the funds that are in the study and the other ones, they'll come back and let us know.
Thank you. Director Davis, and then Director Baker. Director Davis.
Yeah, I just want to thank Charlie for those comments. You know, if it goes beyond just these recreational facilities to other things like trails and campgrounds, I could see the validity of spending this much money on it. The other thing is, I just want to make a question through to staff, and I don't know if they're willing to answer this at this point, but can you cite any examples of possible synergies from what we know right now, like in terms of TASIS and how we've worked with the regional district in the past? I would love to hear some examples that might sway my opinion.
Well, I think part of the intent is to look at those facilities and see if there's synergies, if there's economies of scale with the staffing, administrative programs, training, purchasing, regional programs. I think there's lots of opportunities to look at that.
Thank you. And we're going to wind up with Director Baker. Thank you.
With all due respect to Director Lee, this isn't just about Area D and Campbell River. I mean, that's it's also about Sayward, it's also about Gold River and other areas of the region. So again, this is not just about you and Campbell River. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. I echo your words. Okay, so I think we've had a very good, robust conversation on this. So I'm going to call a question on the motion, and it is
Mr. Chair, I had a deferral in the chat that I was hoping you would acknowledge before calling the question. We already voted on that.
We already defeated a deferral.
I understand. It's the second one. Different content.
Same result.
Chair's discretion.
I'd say it's the same. No, we'll carry on with our item B. Call question on the motion. Those opposed?
Wally.
Anderson.
Abram.
Lee.
Wally, Anderson, Abram, Lee. Any further? Motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Item 11, request for financial assistance, Oyster River Volunteer Fire. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, seconder.
Second.
Director Cornfield. And I'll go CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to add.
Any discussion? See none. I'll call question on receipt. Anyone opposed? See none, carried.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Director Lee, Director Cornfield, second. Thank you. Any discussion? See none, I'll call question. Is anyone opposed? I'll call carried. Item 12, grant application 2021 Active Transportation Planning Program. Motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Director Anderson, second.
Second.
Director Kerr, the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Annika will speak to this.
Go.
Thank you through the chair to the board. The purpose of this report is to consider an application to the 2021 Active Transportation Planning Program to support active transportation through supplemental research, data collection, and mapping, which can inform the Cortes Island Official Community Plan policy content. This program is intended to support local governments to incorporate or enhance active transportation components in their planning documents and includes such items as research, consultation, and policy development. Eligible activities under this grant are limited to research, public engagement, and policy development. Unfortunately, the development or update of standalone active transportation plans, engineering, and capital projects are not eligible for funding under this program. As Cortes has in the past completed a transportation demand study, which included recommended transportation strategies and initiatives, including a recommendation for commuter and recreational trail enhancement study. It was selected as the project given its alignment with the eligibility requirements of the program and as it is to be completed within the grant funding timeline. It's thought that the project could include both research, data collection, and mapping, also audits and assessments of existing trails and infrastructure, which we could then use to incorporate policy content of the OCP. This program has a maximum of 100% contributions to eligible activities to a maximum of $20,000 and an application deadline of May 21st, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anko. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call question receipt. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B is the CSRD submit application in 2021 Active Transportation Planning Program. And that was a commit. Director Anderson?
Second.
Director
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. On the bylaws, bylaw 994-95, OCP rezoning. Shelnick, motion receive.
See.
Director Abrams, second.
Second.
Director Lee, thank you, and CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? Call carried. Item B. That all public hearings related to local government act initiatives affecting land with electoral area at C be postponed until province of BC public health orders allow for indoor public gatherings with participation by general public. Director
Second.
Seconder.
Second.
Director Wally. And discussion. Director Anderson.
Thank you. I'll be voting against this motion. I would support a delay for a few months, but I see it very likely that we won't be able to have mass indoor gatherings for a year or more, and I do not think it's appropriate to delay the core business of community land use planning, which is arguably the main reason regional districts exist, indefinitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Moglove.
Thank you, Chair. I know I don't have a vote on this, so I just wanted to comment that a little bit somewhat disappointed in this, and I for the reasons that Director Anderson has stated, but I just wanted to let the directors know that you know, we've been holding public hearings virtually for almost for a year, maybe not quite, but off and on. And, you know, they've gone actually better than I had expected. At first I was thinking, you know, this is going to be really difficult, but they've actually gone fairly well. And it gives the community an opportunity to be heard on these different applications that otherwise things are going to get stalled. The other thing I'm going to say, I'm actually thinking that once COVID is over, I think there'll be a combination of virtual and in person, because I think some people actually prefer the virtual public hearing because it's sort of almost less stressful because they don't have to be in front of this sort of audience and they're just looking at a computer screen. So I just put it there that we've done it in our community, and I think it's worked really, really well. Everyone feels safe, but the business of the community can move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Director McGough. Director Cornfield.
Just to reiterate Director Moglov's concerns, yes, I know I can't vote either, but in the city, it's different with us. We have 7 plus our staff that have to be in attendance, whereas in the electoral areas, you have 3 people at most that are directors to be there. And I think that you could socially distance and mask and have public attendance properly done with masks distanced. And even if you did set up a plexiglass booth that they came to, I mean, we have elections that are done. We did a by-election here in Campbell River. We had a provincial election that was called that met COVID restrictions. And I don't think that there's any reason why we couldn't have an in-person and virtual simultaneously. And then people can make their choice. But to say no public hearing means no changes at any time. And if there's a requirement for a public hearing, you've just eliminated anything there. So, gee, if it's a bylaw change to support somebody put in something to do with their house to bring it up to standard, you're now preventing them from doing that. So I think you're opening it up to challenges by putting a bylaw in that prohibits public hearing, in which case you've now negated any kind of development property. And I think it's not a wise move.
Thank you, Director Cornfield. I have Director Abram, Evans, and Colburn. Director Abram.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that this has nothing to do with inhibiting growth or development. This has to do with the safety of the public and the ability of the public to be able to appear in person on a major development, biggest development ever on Quadra Island. This is not an addition to your deck, Charlie. This is 54 houses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The public of Quadra Island wants to see this happen. You had a delegation at the last meeting of 4 very disparate groups come and tell you they want an in-person public hearing because we're expecting more than a couple of hundred people that will want to attend, and they will not attend virtually. So this is what we're coming forward with, and as you said, you won't be voting on it. So we could just move on.
Thank you for your comment, Director Abram. Director Evans.
Yes, thank you. And I certainly appreciate that we're not voting on this, but as a collaborative body, you know, we should be at least listening. And if there's opportunities to hear from experiences around the board, I think that's really what this conference. And I certainly appreciate Director Abrams' comments about he's looking at potential people coming. But I would just share that even though in the future I do believe it'll be a hybrid model, we also heard from people that they did not want to attend virtually. And now that we have been doing it for over a year, I think we're finding that a lot more people are interested in virtual and meeting in person. I certainly appreciate that this is what you're saying, but I'm just wondering if there's any specific opposed to virtual that you've heard that has not been expressed today. I just haven't heard anything that would be something new that that I haven't heard in the past. I certainly appreciate the conundrum that you have with your communities, but virtual public meeting, and for all the reasons that my fellow councillors have stated around transparency and efficiency, certainly has worked in Campbell River.
Thank you, Director Evans. I've Director Colburn and Director Anderson. I got you down for a second time. So I've got Director Colburn and Director Lee.
And I just had a question about, so this is just for this particular, the OCP and rezoning. I just don't understand why it's just Area C. You know, if the EAs had talked about it, I just would like some clarity on that. If we're holding some in some areas and not some in some areas, I'm worried about messaging. That was all. Just a quick question to staff.
Joe?
Yes, well, it's not consistent, and this is just for Area C.
Joe? Director Lee?
Having heard from the directors from Campbell River about how they appreciate their virtual experiences at public hearings, we in the electoral areas have not had the same experience, possibly because of the communications problems in the electoral areas, where a lot of people don't have access to good internet connections or good phone connections. We've had the last half dozen public hearings, very, very few people attend them. One public hearing for the Sayward area, we had only the applicant attend, and other people might have been trying to get through. There's been no real participation in our public hearings in the electoral areas. We know that this application is a large one and would attract a lot of attention on Quadra Island, and we want the public to be able to express their interests in, you know, property, and as it is their right under the Local Government Act. And I personally see virtual public hearings as an impediment to people in the electoral areas to be able to express what they feel about an application, and also to hear what other people say. A public hearing is for people to not only express their own view, but to hear what other people in the community have to say, and to have an accountable, transparent process. And I think we can only do that in the electoral areas if we have, you know, an open public hearing. It may be a hybrid, but I think people need to be given the opportunity to come to a venue and express their views.
Okay, thank you. I've got Director Anderson and Abram for second time, but any other first-time speakers? If not, I'm going to say a couple of words. In Gold River, we've had 5 public hearings now. We have more people show up through our virtual public hearings than we ever did in having a public hearing meeting. We mail them out. They've got information by email, virtual meetings. They can phone us. We have, like I said, a better turnout doing them virtually than we did in the past. We were elected to move our communities forward, and by stalling on projects, in my opinion, is slowing down business in our areas. And when I look at, you know, the motion for electoral area C, and then I hear a director specifically talk about one project that's coming up, it concerns me. You know, so is it for one project, or is it for any projects for now till who knows when the COVID protocols are lifted? So I've got big concerns. I think you're slowing down process. They can be done by virtual in a safe manner. Everybody can have the opportunity to have their input. So again, like the other municipal directors, we don't get to vote, but that's just my
On
input.
a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you're doing an excellent job, but might I just remind you of our procedures bylaw that states that if the chair wishes to express his opinions on a matter, that he step down from the chair.
Okay, well, I was asked for a little bit of latitude like I have in the past, but that's fine. I take it, Director Wally. I'll make sure I do that next time.
Just a point.
Director Anderson.
Thank you. I certainly concur that some of the public hearings have been very poorly attended, very troublingly so. On Cortez, there was one public hearing since COVID that was relatively decently attended, and there was the opportunity for people to come in person, sort of one at a time, indoor, in one door, out the other door, address the politicians who were online. I think this kind of hybrid is doable. But my question through to staff, I pulled up the minutes from the EASC meeting when this was last considered, and the motion that EASC passed was quite different from the one in front of us. And so I'm asking staff to clarify what the difference is. At EASC, it says that all public hearings in Area C be postponed until BC provincial health orders allow for indoor public gatherings with participation by the entire community being made possible. And the one in front of us says all public hearings related to Local Government Act Part 14 initiatives. That language was not previously embedded. And so my question is, what is Local Government Act Part 14, and is that some subset of all public hearings?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to respond to that question?
Yes, please, Mr. Yates.
Thank you. So the motion that was passed at EASC really was quite broad in that public hearings, of course, can cover many different areas of authority within the regional district. Part 14 refers to land use, zoning, OCP, development permits, those kinds of things, which is the domain of the electoral area directors. A motion broadly seeking to deal with public hearings of any type within electoral area C would have been up to the whole board to make that decision, not just the electoral areas. So that's the difference.
So I would express a concern then. So the motion made at EASC, if translated onto this agenda, and I don't know under whose authority one takes a motion from EASC and changes it, that's concerning to me. But if EASC's motion was put forward before the whole board would be voting on it. So this seems to be a way of having only EASC vote on the matter and indeed getting at a subset of public hearings. And so my concern then is, are we actually trying to get at the Shell-Inc proposal or land use proposals, as opposed to what I'm hearing from Director Abram is the concern for public safety. And if it's a concern for public safety, it should be all public hearings. And I'm hearing the whole board should vote on that. So I'm asking the chair, maybe this needs to be postponed so the chair can look into how to best proceed on this one, because I very rarely see a motion changed with this much substance. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can chime in on that. It was clearly the intent that public hearings regarding land use issues were what the director wanted to postpone due to COVID. So, I have enabled the latitude of that because I participated now in dozens of conversations, and the area director is clear that it was about land use issues.
But what's at hand is public gatherings and the safety thereof.
Well, again, it's more than just the resolution. The intent of the resolution to me was clear that it was about land use issues, not all public gatherings in general. We never talked about all gatherings in general. It was always in relation to land use issues.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm asking that you rule on the appropriateness of this.
I have a difficult because it is a land use and the only reasoning is health issues. I would prefer to see a referred motion back to clarify this.
Mr. Chair, may I please?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Yates, or sorry, Mr. Leach said it quite clearly, and Anderson knows full good and well this was strictly about land use, and she's trying to subvert the process. I object to that. And
Objection.
The fact
This is about health.
This is about having public hearings on massive issues that cannot be participated by the general public. Now, Director Evans asked the most pertinent question, and I would like to add one little piece too, and that is that it is very difficult in our area. We have held 3 public hearings virtually. 2 of them had nobody show up, and they were contentious issues, but they were small. They were one lot, one was a 1-lot subdivision, one extension of, excuse me, Mr. Chair. The point was that we don't have decent internet on Quadra Island. We don't have everybody with access to internet of any kind, decent or otherwise. We don't have everybody savvy on internet. And they want to participate in this, but they will not participate if it is in a public building at this time. So all of those issues, you have to look at them all sort of combined, and our program itself, Teams, as we have seen with our own directors here at our meetings, have been cut off. So, we can't have that happening in a public hearing with something so massive and so important. The direction at the EASC meeting was absolutely clear. The direction, or the write-up on your agenda right now is very clear. It's electoral area only voting. It's basically to not have any public hearings. Cutting me off in the middle of a sentence really doesn't help, Mr. Chair. The public gatherings, participations, etc. This was strictly about land use issues that are up for adoption or otherwise. So I'm asking that we just move ahead with the bylaw as it is, as it stands, the recommendation as it stands, which is all electoral area directors, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Call the question.
Thank you very much. I was just going to call a question. We've had enough discussion, so I'm going to go question on the motion. Anyone opposed?
Anderson.
Seeing one, call it carried. Thank you. Bylaw number 424, rezoning
Thank you.
application. Motion received.
Move receipt.
Move receipt. Second, Colburn.
Thank you, Director Wally and Colburn. To CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board asked us to get some clarification on some correspondence with the First Nation. We have done that, and subsequent, we have the following motion for your approval.
Thank you. Any discussion? Director Ebro.
Yes, Mr. Chair. First of all, I lost my page, and now I've gotten back. You said there was a motion for our approval, Mr. Leach. What is the motion that you're looking at?
It's B on the screen.
Item B.
B, that a further report be prepared for the board's consideration following the meeting with the Wheel of Come. Is that correct?
That's the staff's recommendation, yeah.
Okay, fine. That's
okay. Thank you, Director Corfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to staff, was this item referred to Comox First Nation?
If I can answer that.
Thank you through the chair to Director Cornfield. Yes, it was.
And? their response?
I don't have that response in front of me at this time. It was provided as part of the initial report that went to both the Electoral Area Services Committee and the board. There was no, the only request that the SRD has had to meet is from the Wee-Wai-Kum Nation. We've clarified with the respondents from the Wee-Wai-Kai and the Wee-Wai-Kum, and the Wee-Wai-Kai have declined.
Right, and I guess did Comox decline, or did they say nothing? The reason I ask is their home reserve is Cusing, which is in Sayward. We have we have the former mayor representing the regional district with, or at least I think we do, representing us on the treaty with Comox First Nation at the request of Comox First Nation, because they do have areas in and around Sayward. And so my concern there is that's their home area going back millennia, that anything to do with Helmicken Island, just off the other side of the strait from their home reserve, there's a high probability that that would contain sites of historic cultural significance to that First Nation. So I think we should be getting at least a response back for them. If they have no concerns, that's great. Then we know. But at the same time, I think the onus is on us to confirm that.
Thank you through the chair. If I may respond, I've just pulled up the report that went forward to EASC with the summary of comments received back from First Nations, and the Comox First Nations did not provide a response, but were referred.
You're muted, Charlie.
I just think that the onus is on us to make sure to not respond, period, provides no information to us. If they have no objections to it, that's fine. And I think that's what needs to be clarified, especially when dealing with these kinds of issues.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you, Charlie. And I think, Charlie, you of anybody should know better than any of the rest of us that the duty to consult is the provincial government. We do it as basically a courtesy, and we have a very specific list that we vote on which First Nations should be referred to, and that list went through the board and it was approved, and the Comox were referred, and they came back, as did most of the others, with no response. That is not untypical, and it is not our duty to then go out and seek a response when we get no response.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on receipt? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item B, the further report be prepared for board consideration following a meeting with the Wee-Wai-Kum First Nation. Do I have a mover?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Anderson.
Director Anderson's moving it. Do I have a seconder?
Second, Mogla.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Director Abram.
Okay, so this is on an island with two bays, both of them sort of horseshoe shaped on the east side of the island. And what is being asked for is a private moorage in a zone that does not permit private moorage. So a rezoning is required. The amount of area that is being requested in each of them, I think one is 3-point-something hectares and one is 5-point-something hectares. That is, I think in any layman's terms, absurd. You don't put a 100-foot wide and 5 hectares of land, which basically takes up the entirety of both bays, the shoreline of the entirety of both bays would be used, which would mean nobody can come along and apply for something on those areas. So I'm not in favor of going this direction. The
Okay.
other part
Hang on,
that was
Director
in the
Abram.
report.
Director Abram,
Yeah.
the, the motion on there for board's consideration following a meeting, it's not going any further than that. That's the meeting. That's the motion on the floor. A report will
Is
come
the
back to us. A report will come back to the board for consideration following the We Become First Nations meeting.
And
That's
I
the motion on the floor.
appreciate that. If I may, if you will indulge another second or two, the request from the planning department to change the AC2 zoning, which is what all the water area in Area C is, to change that to allow private moorage is something that the community spent 3 years developing and would require an OCP amendment. So this, this meeting cannot include that part of it. That's why I'm bringing it up at this time about the meeting, because it's not part of that meeting. It can't be. It's a totally different discussion. And
Okay.
staff.
So then what you're saying is totally, excuse me, Director Abram, what you're saying then is totally not in the motion that's on the floor that we're discussing right now, so I'll stop you there. We're discussing the motion on the floor. Anything else on the motion on the floor? If not, questions been called. Anyone opposed?
Opposed, Abram.
Opposed, Wally.
Opposed, Lee.
Anybody else opposed? Motion is carried. Item 3, bylaw 428, Connected Coast Last Mile Funding. Motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Director
Second.
Adams, Director Cornfield, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the board's direction, we've put together the last mile agreements for the Connected Coast for both the areas that received funding through provincial grants and our 275 agreement. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Director Abram, do you have your hand up?
Mistakenly.
Okay, thank you.
I will say, if I can just add one thing, maybe it'll intercept a question that possibly Director Anderson has. If these bylaws pass today, then these bylaws include everything that we've talked about in terms of funding, relationships, partnerships. So there is nothing that remains in camera in terms of these two projects.
Thank you, CEO. Director Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. And I hadn't thought of it, but now you brought it up. I would like to have that in writing somehow, either a rise and report motion from the board on all of that or something, because I do not want to get caught on this one.
We're in an open meeting.
How could you advise that we could do that formally and legally, please?
As again, Mr. Yates has spoken to several times, bylaws must be open session and it's inherent as part of the process. Everything that we've had here is in open session, is for public consumption. So I'm not sure what else to say to that. Unless the board directs me, I'm not going to get a legal opinion on that.
Mr. Chairman, I can also add these bylaws will be advertised in next week's paper, Kamloops River paper. They will be placed on our website for full public viewing and observation. And so they are, in all sense of the words, public. The content of
And Mr. Chair, I'm not questioning for a moment the public nature of what we have in front of us. My question is, as our CEO said, the discussions that we had previously had in camera, he's now saying I can speak publicly, and yet that hasn't been
the material that we have here. Everything that's been in closed session those agreements are in these bylaws, everything. You're free to discuss any material. Everything you see here is public, has been public since Friday, and as Mr. Yates says, will be actually advertised in the paper.
So there's nothing of substance that we've discussed in camera that isn't here.
Everything is here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on receipt? See none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Item B, the bylaw 428B.
Move
bylaw
B law, the B.
B for the first time.
Second.
Cornfield and Director Evans. Any discussion? Call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried.
Move
Item
C.
C.
Director Adams and Director Cornfield.
Second, Colburn.
I'll get you on the next one. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item D, bylaw 428, returned for further consideration by the board on the May 26th meeting with any feedback received. Director Colburn. Second by
Director Evans.
Director Evans. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Correspondence.
Move receipt of all correspondence.
Please pull the item on the cell tower.
Pull 1, please.
And 5.
Okay, number 1, provincial visual quality objectives, motion received.
I would move that the April 12th, 21 correspondence from the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association regarding the visual quality objectives of the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development be received.
Your seconder.
And I will have a subsequent
Seconder.
following.
Second, Davis.
Director Davis, thank you. Any discussion?
If I may,
Director Cornfield?
visual quality objectives for the Sunshine Coast Forest District come up. Take in Cortez, but also the area of the coast on the other side. The boundary runs right around Stewart Island. These areas that it looks at or covers off are extremely important to our tourism organizations, including the Wilderness Tourism Organization. These are always and always have been sensitive hot button issues to us. And I think we should comment back on, or staff should comment back on the visual quality objectives that are being proposed. That affects the rate of harvest and of our forests, but predominantly it's that visual impact, which is the level of alteration that's perceived by the public and can have huge impacts on other resource values.
Thank you. Anything else on receipt? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seen none, carried. Director Cornfield.
I would move that this item be referred to staff for response to the District Manager, Sunshine Coast Forest District.
Do I have a seconder?
Second, Davis.
I'm good.
Director Davis, thank you. On the motion. Anything to add, Director Cornfield?
No, I just think that it's important. If staff need a hand in doing it, I mean, that's what I did for a living for many years. I don't mind giving them a hand.
Thank you. Director Abram?
Yes, thank you. And just it's a point correction to Director Cornfield's comments. This area is extremely important to our areas, and the Sunshine Coast Forest District does extend down the middle of the channel around from the side of Reed Island up Morel Island, Sonora Island, and over towards Stewart and all those rendezvous, etc. So it is a much bigger area than was mentioned, and it is extremely important. And there is a very large movement now With papers being written, I think I would like to ask staff to please accept these papers as background information concerning the visual quality objectives and why they are so important to the tourism industry that you had a presentation from. Earlier, the Wilderness Tourism Association, they have been part of writing these papers, and I think the information would be invaluable for you to use in response to this letter, which I believe is not just expressing a need for more time, but also a position.
Okay, thank you. Director Davis.
Yeah, question to Director Cornfield. Do you not want to incorporate their ask here to extend comments on this order from 2 days from now to the end of June 2021? Because it sounds like this might be moot.
If I may, Chair.
Director Cornfield.
Okay, that's why I said this. If we refer it to staff for response to the DM to extend, and I should have probably added to extend the deadline for comment in the motion. That was my whole idea of getting it to staff for response right away. Okay. And following that, these are very important issues that need review by staff, right? So they're the ones that would do the actual work and provide comments back based on all the input and information that they get, whether that's through Director Abram or tourism groups or organizations. I think it's all important, but that's a staff function as I see it. So okay. Let's request for the extension of the deadline right away quick. If we get that, then staff can go into the meat and potatoes and comment back.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to call question on the motion. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 2, Camp River Library Project. Motion receive.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Director Evans and I will be attending an executive meeting of the library board on Saturday. I think Director Evans is coming. I'm going to be there, and it would be great if Campbell River Council would get behind this project solidly, so that there's no, hesitancy on the library board's part. So I don't know what you can do about that, but
it's the city of Camp River.
I'm just expressing that it would be nice if the VIRL board had solid support from Campbell River.
Director Adams.
Thank you. And to Director Lee, not only did council last year confirm the location, but also confirm the commitment in the financial plan. And most recently, as of the week before last, recommitted to that location and had discussions with Ms. Bonanno regarding that. And I believe there will be an update at your board meeting on Saturday.
Thank you. Yep. I know that. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else on item 2? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 3, appointment BC Ferry. Motion receive.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, seconder.
Second.
Director Cornfield, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 4, COVID-19 update. Motion receive the report.
Receipt.
Director Lee, second. Seconder.
Second.
Director Cornfield. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 5, human trafficking awareness. Motion receive.
So moved.
Director Anderson, seconder.
Second.
Director Adams, thank you. Any further? Seeing none, I'll call question. Anyone opposed?
I have my hand up, Mr. Chair.
Director Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have anything to say about the content of this, but I do think it's out of respect when somebody writes to us asking for something that we at least acknowledge receipt of their letter. It's different when UBCM or somebody with Fairy Authority just gives us a heads up. But I would like us to respond just saying, you know, thank you for your work on this effort. We've received your letter or something, because this is the second time she's written and hasn't even heard that we've received it. I'd be making a subsequent thing.
Thank you. Anything else with receipt? Questions called. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. You have your subsequent.
Just that the chair write a response acknowledging receipt of this letter. Thank you.
Seconder.
Second.
Director Lee, thank you. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 6, Quadra Island Cell Tower. Motion received.
Move on.
Director Abram, seconder.
Second.
Director Wally. And I'll go CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Director Abram has a motion here. Edie has it.
Okay. Director Abram on,
Yes.
on receipt.
Oh, I thought we'd already passed receipt. Sorry.
No.
Is it just? Well, that's all it's here is receipt. So
Okay.
yes, I do have a motion.
Okay, if there's no
And,
discussion on
I
receipt,
had to get,
if there's no discussion on receipt, I'll call question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And Director Abram, you have a subsequent.
well, yes, I do. I do believe we discuss
Yep.
receipt all the time, but anyway. Okay, this is a subsequent motion, which I've gotten some help from. It's regarding the Quadra Island Cell Tower construction. And the motion would be that the chair write a letter to IAED.
Whose phone?
Not mine.
The
Not
chair
mine.
writing that ISED bringing the attention to TELUS has not
Into
engaged.
their attention. Has TELUS has not engaged the Quadra Island community in any meaningful manner regarding the proposed cell tower, and that the SRD opposes any permission granted by ISED to construct cellular towers on Quadra Island until the community has been properly consulted.
Second.
That has second. Okay,
Second.
thank you. If I may speak to it.
Director Cornfield seconded. Director Abram, go ahead.
Okay, so this issue, it affects all of us. This is not Quadra Island. The issues that you probably are aware of that we had to go through, everybody on Quadra Island, not everybody, but I think it was 200 or some odd people, had to do speed tests and screenshots of what kind of service they were getting from TELUS, because TELUS had given the government information that was not quite correct, that we were covered to a degree of 50 megabits down, 10 megabits up on our internet speeds. That is untrue, and we proved it with our screenshots. The highest one we had was 38. Most of them were down in the 10s. So that in itself cut out a huge amount of our funding for the Connected Coast, which we're all involved in. We just passed a huge motion to borrow a bunch of money. And that's because of what TELUS has done in this situation. The situation now is that they are trying to further impede our movement on the Connected Coast by putting up cell towers that will provide cell service to areas, also telling people that they can also get high-speed internet from those cell towers. which I believe they can, at a great deal of cost. That part they're not telling them. So if we want to get our Connected Coast, continue our Connected Coast initiative on its way, we need to stop initiatives like this. And the only way that's going to happen is if they hear from our communities, and I'm talking about our regional communities here, to say, we want to be consulted on this, properly consulted, to tell the population what it is you have planned. The other thing you're not telling people is that 5G service is contemplated. Now, that's going to bring up a whole other realm of opposition to this particular initiative on their part. While we were sitting here in this meeting, I received 3 emails from people in the regional district area complaining about the fact that, and it wasn't about 5G, but it was about the fact that cell towers were going to go up with absolutely no consultation with the public.
Okay.
So, you know, I think it's pertinent. I hope that you will pass it and we will get this off to them immediately. So
Okay.
please support this motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Okay.
Seeing none, I'll call question on the motions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 7, BG McCam River, motion received.
So moved, Mr. Chair. So
Director
thank you
Lee.
letter to Area D.
Seconder, Director Cornfield, I believe it was.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, I was grateful to get their thank you letter. I put it on file when they apply for next year. Can I just slip something in that I forgot at the beginning? I talked to Marlene Wright and she wanted me to thank the board for the flowers that you sent her.
Okay.
She was going to send a note, but I said I would convey to the board how grateful she was to receive those.
Thank you very much, Director Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, on receipt, anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item P, members' reports, 2021 Ocean Production Plan, motion received. Director Abram.
Second.
Seconder?
Yeah,
Director Cornfield.
yes, please.
Anything to add, Director Abram?
No, that's fine. And it's just for your information.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. No management, no new business. No Denman. Closed. As a report for CEO be received.
So moved.
Director Lee, second by
Second.
Director Evans.
Director Evans. On receipt, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B, the closed session be held following.
Move to go in closed session under the named sections in item B.
And seconder,
Second.
Director Cornfield. Call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Motion to terminate.
Move termination.
Director
Second.
Wally, Director Cornfield. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Do we need to leave this platform and come back in?